Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at this article called 10 Phrases Girls Say When They're Secretly Crushing on You, but Trying to Play It Cool.
Okay.
Now,
Sounds interesting.
I know, right? The title's a little bit out there,
Yeah.
but we're going to unpack these phrases,
Mm-hmm.
see if there's some real psychology behind them,
For sure.
maybe learn a thing or two about how we communicate,
Yeah.
our own feelings.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how often we use these really subtle cues and this indirect communication,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to something like, romantic interest.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump right into the first phrase on this list.
All right.
You're so annoying.
Oh.
Now, on the surface, this doesn't exactly scream secret crush, right? It sounds more like,
Yeah.
well, annoyance.
Straight up annoyance.
Yeah.
But think about it sometimes. Like a little playful teasing can be a way to kind of get someone's attention, to create a connection, even if it's through mock frustration,
So it's like a way of flirting, but disguised as an insult?
Exactly. There's actually a whole bunch of research
Wow.
on the psychology of playful teasing in attraction.
Interesting.
It can be a way to kind of test boundaries, see how someone reacts, and then create that sense of intimacy through shared humor.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Imagine someone is teasing you about your favorite band, but they're smiling, and their body language is relaxed.
Yeah.
You can kind of tell they're just messing around.
Exactly. The nonverbal cues are super crucial here.
Yeah.
The tone of voice, the facial expressions, body language, all of that stuff can reveal way more than what the words actually are.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. So on to phrase number 2. You're such a great friend.
Ooh.
This one kind of sounds like the dreaded friend zone.
Right.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah.
But it's not always a dead end. Remember, the whole premise of this article is that these phrases are used when someone's trying to hide their feelings.
Right.
So saying, you're a great friend, can be a way to keep things safe,
Wow.
avoid the risk of rejection
Yeah.
while still staying close to that person.
So it's like a shield.
Yeah, like a shield.
Protecting their heart while also maybe hoping you'll see through it.
Exactly. And from a psychological perspective, this ties into the fear of vulnerability that so often comes with romantic feelings.
Oh, really?
Putting yourself out there is risky.
It is.
And for some people, staying in that friend zone feels safer, even if it means not actually saying how they feel.
Yeah. It's like they're saying, I like you, but I'm scared. So let's just stay friends for now and we'll see what happens.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a way to manage those feelings, but still leave the door open,
Oh, for sure. So what you're saying is, if you're hearing this and you also have feelings, it might be time to step up and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Take a chance.
Take a chance.
See if those feelings are reciprocated.
Direct and honest communication.
Yeah.
It's always the best way to go, even if it feels scary.
100%.
Ugh.
Okay, let's move on to phrase number 3. I'm way too busy for a relationship. Now, I have to admit, I've used this one myself.
Really?
Maybe not because I had a secret crush,
Right.
but sometimes life does get crazy busy.
Of course. Yeah. There are definitely times when people genuinely are too busy for a relationship.
Right.
But if someone's consistently using this as an excuse,
Yeah.
it might be signaling something a little bit deeper.
Like what?
It could be a way of avoiding vulnerability,
Okay.
of keeping their emotional distance. So instead of saying I'm scared of getting hurt or I'm not really sure how I feel,
Yeah.
they deflect with a more practical reason oh, I'm busy.
So it's like a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
A way to keep their feelings at arm's length.
Totally. It's easier to just say I'm too busy than to actually confront all those complicated emotions.
Right. But what about the person on the receiving end of this?
Yeah.
Should they just sit around and wait patiently?
That really depends on their own feelings.
Okay.
If they're interested, they could show patience and understanding.
Right.
But obviously without pressuring the other person.
Yeah.
Sometimes actions speak louder than words, right?
True.
Just being present.
Yeah.
And genuinely interested in getting to know someone
Right.
can go a long way.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm.
Let's tackle phrase number 4 here. I didn't even notice that about you. This one seems a little tricky to decode.
This is a classic example of playing it cool.
Okay.
They might say they didn't notice,
Yeah.
but chances are they definitely did.
Especially if it's something obvious like a new haircut or a new outfit.
Yeah, you can't miss that.
Hard to miss that.
It's a way of downplaying their interest while still acknowledging that they're paying attention to you,
Right.
that they're observing the details.
So it's like a subtle way of flirting, of saying I see you, without actually saying it.
Exactly. It's all about creating intrigue, keeping the interaction playful and engaging.
For sure. Okay, on to phrase number 5. I'm not really into dating right now. This sounds similar to the I'm too busy excuse.
You're right. It kind of falls into that similar category of like indirect communication.
Yeah.
It's another way to create emotional distance.
Okay.
To kind of protect yourself from potential hurt or rejection.
So they might actually be interested, but they're too scared to admit it.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And it could also be a way of like testing the waters.
Okay.
To see if you're willing to stick around, even if like a romantic relationship isn't on the table right now.
So patience is key here too.
Absolutely.
No.
If you're interested, showing them that you're comfortable taking things slow.
Right.
And getting to know them like on a deeper level can build trust and then potentially lead to something more.
All right, good to know. Let's move on to phrase number 6. You should totally date someone like her. Oof.
Wow.
This one sounds like a recipe for heartache.
It can feel that way, but remember we're looking for those hidden meanings here.
Right.
This phrase could actually be a test.
A test? How so?
They're trying to gauge your reaction.
Oh.
Do you show jealousy?
Hey.
Do you like defend your interest in them?
Oh.
Or do you just agree and move on?
Okay.
It's a way to kind of gather information about your feelings without directly asking.
So it's like throwing out some bait and seeing how you bite.
Exactly. It's a subtle way of figuring out where you stand without having to be vulnerable themselves.
Wow, that's pretty sneaky. I'm starting to see a pattern here. A lot of these phrases are about testing the waters, protecting oneself, and communicating indirectly.
You're totally picking up on it. People often resort to indirect communication when they're feeling vulnerable or unsure of themselves. Right.
It's a way to navigate all those complexities of romantic interest without having to put their heart on the line, you know?
For sure. All right, before we dive into the rest of the list, let's take a step back and consider why people might choose to express their feelings so indirectly. Like, what's going on beneath the surface?
That's a great question. And it takes us into some pretty fascinating territory. We'll explore that in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Stay tuned.
I'll be here.
All right. See ya.
Welcome back. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, why do we do that?
I know. Why not just come out and say, hey, I kind of like you?
Well, I think, like we talked about before, fear of rejection is huge.
Yeah.
Putting yourself out there emotionally, it's scary.
Yeah.
These indirect phrases act as like a buffer,
Right.
So you can test the waters without having to be too vulnerable.
So it's like dipping your toe in the pool before you like jump in head first.
Totally. They want to see if you're interested without risking like straight up rejection,
Yeah.
And it's not just about personal fear, like societal norms play a role too.
Right.
In a lot of cultures, it's still seen as more acceptable for guys to make the first move.
So these phrases could be a way for someone to signal their interest without breaking those social conventions.
Exactly. It lets them kind of express interest while staying within what's considered like socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And then there's the power dynamic to think about.
Oh, right.
Like if someone has a crush on someone they think is like out of their league, they might use these phrases to kind of flirt subtly without risking too much embarrassment.
So it's all about navigating those complex social situations, trying to express yourself without making things awkward.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a delicate dance.
Totally. But this whole conversation reminds me of another form of like subtle communication.
Yeah.
Flirting. Aren't these phrases just another way of flirting?
Oh, that's a really good point.
Flirting is all about that playful communication.
Yeah.
You're testing boundaries. You're creating that sense of attraction.
Right. And these phrases can be seen as subtle ways of doing just that.
Yeah.
Even though they might not be directly saying, I like you.
Right.
They're still creating that spark.
Yeah, for sure.
Seeing if there's a connection.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it be easier, though, if we could all just be upfront and honest about our feelings?
Right.
Like, what's the downside of open communication?
In a perfect world, open communication would be the norm.
Right.
It's so important for building healthy relationships.
Yeah.
But in reality, things aren't always that simple.
Yeah.
We all have our fears and insecurities.
Well, sure.
And those unspoken social rules that kind of complicate things.
Yeah, that's true. But even though these phrases can be confusing, I can see how they could also be kind of endearing.
Endearing.
Yeah.
Really?
Like they show a certain vulnerability.
Okay.
A hesitancy that's almost charming
Yeah. Okay.
It's like they're saying, I like you, but I'm not ready to shout it from the rooftops just yet.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like a secret language,
Right.
Like a way of expressing feelings without totally putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes that kind of subtle dance can be just as meaningful as like a grand declaration of love.
Okay, I'm convinced there's something sweet about the awkwardness, the hesitation, the whole I'm trying to play it cool, but I really like you vibe.
Totally. It just reminds us that we're all human.
Yeah.
We all have those vulnerabilities.
For sure.
And sometimes the most meaningful connections start with that little playful ambiguity.
All right.
Yeah.
You convince me. Are you ready to dive back into this list?
Let's do it.
And decode these final phrases.
We've got some good ones coming up.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, we are back and ready to crack the code on these last few phrases.
All right.
You ready to finish this list?
Let's do it.
Okay, so next one. You remind me of my brother. We kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm still a little confused. Like, is this always a bad sign?
Not necessarily. Context is super important.
Right.
If it's said with a laugh, like a really lighthearted tone, maybe even a blush, it could be their way of downplaying their attraction and keeping things in the safe zone.
So they're acknowledging a connection, but like masking it as something familiar and platonic.
Exactly. They might be thinking like, I kind of like you, but I don't want to say it, so I'll just compare you to my brother.
Right. But what if it is said in a serious tone? Like they genuinely just see you as a sibling.
Yeah.
Is all hope lost?
Well, even then, feelings can change over time. What starts as a friendship can sometimes blossom into something more.
Right. We all know those couples who started as friends.
Totally.
So there's still hope for those of us who've been brother-zoned.
There's always hope.
Mm.
But communication is key.
Okay.
If you have feelings for someone, don't be afraid to express them, even if it means taking a little risk.
That's good advice. Okay, let's move on to phrase number 8. We're just friends, right? This one seems straightforward.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling it's not that simple.
You're right. The seemingly harmless question actually has like layers of meaning underneath.
Okay.
They're probably looking for reassurance, but not about the friendship. They want to know how you feel.
All right.
And they're kind of hoping that you'll disagree and reveal that you're also romantically interested.
So sneaky. It's a sneaky way of getting you to admit your feelings.
Yeah.
Without having to be direct themselves.
Exactly. It's a classic move, using a question to kind of express a desire.
Wow.
To indirectly invite you to make a move.
Okay. On to phrase number 9. You're way too good for me.
Oh.
This one kind of makes my heart ache a little bit.
This is a tough one.
Yeah.
Because it often comes from a place of insecurity. They might genuinely believe that they're not good enough for you.
Right.
And it can be a way of like self-sabotaging before they risk getting hurt.
So they're pushing you away before you have a chance to reject them.
It's a defense mechanism.
Okay.
A way to protect themselves from potential pain.
What's the best way to respond to someone who says something like that?
Reassurance is key.
Okay.
Let them know why you value them.
Yeah?
Why you enjoy spending time with them. You challenge those negative self-perceptions.
Okay.
And help them to see their own worth.
Okay, good advice. And finally, we are on the last phrase. I'm not looking for anything serious right now. This feels familiar, doesn't it?
It does. It echoes a lot of the other phrases we've talked about. Well, keeping it casual, avoiding vulnerability, protecting themselves from potential heartbreak.
But it doesn't necessarily mean they're not interested.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They could be testing your patience to see if you're going to stick around and show them that you're different from everyone else.
So what's the big takeaway here? What have we learned from dissecting all of these phrases?
I think the biggest takeaway is that communication, especially when it comes to romance, it's rarely straightforward.
Right.
We use this indirect language for so many different reasons. Fear of rejection, societal expectations, power dynamics, personal insecurities.
Right. It's like we're all speaking in code.
Yeah.
Hoping that the other person can decipher our message.
Totally. And while it can be really confusing sometimes, there's something kind of beautiful about it too.
Okay.
All these subtle signals, the hesitation, trying to play it cool, it just shows how complex and messy human connection can be.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we're all just trying to figure out the world of relationships.
Yeah.
Hoping to find someone who understands our secret language.
Well said. And hey, maybe by understanding these subtle signals, we can all become better communicators in all of our relationships, romantic and platonic.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the way people express their feelings.
Me too. It's been a fascinating journey into the world of subtle communication.
Yeah.
And the hidden language of attraction.
And with that, we'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
How might understanding these subtle signals change the way you interact with others?
That's a good one.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you next time.